American-Canadian. Beijing's place at Cartouche is sort of a signature. Hi, I'm in Sipoonkorpi National Park in Finland, and this seems like as good a place as any to talk about the history of national identity in Finland. Now, what does that term mean, national identity? Well, that's the idea in a group of people that they are all a single nation, a group of people bound together. And if we go back to the late 1700s, early 1800s, there really wasn't a lot of national identity in Finland. Finland was part of Sweden, and then after 1808, it was part of Tsarist Russia. And there was very little national identity among the Finns, very little desire to be an independent country, even. There was almost no Finnish nobility, and what Finnish elite there was mostly spoke Swedish. In fact, Finnish was seen as a language only suitable to peasants among those elite. But all that is about to change. The development of a national identity is a pretty common process in history. A good example, or think about the Angles, the Saxons, and the Utes becoming English. Those disparate groups of people created a common identity as English and created the nation of England. So what makes Finland really interesting? The whole process played out very quickly, in about 100 years. Again, there was very little national identity when Finland was part of Sweden. Then it became the Grand Duchy of Finland in the Russian Empire. And that would kick off a century-long process that would end with Finland not only having a national identity, but becoming independent. The first big development in Finnish nationalism came in 1835, when a man named Elias Lönnrot published a book called the Kalevala. It was a collection of folk myths that he had gathered up over a couple of years of traveling around the Grand Duchy of Finland. Now, surprisingly, he chose to not translate it into Swedish, which is what everyone expected him to do. He published it in Finnish. This was a huge celebration of folk culture and folk myth and different myths and stories that bound all Finnish people together. But more than that, it was a huge celebration of the Finnish language. It became a literary language, a language that the elite were interested in speaking and quoting. This book had a major influence on the development of a Finnish national identity. The second big event in the development of Finnish national identity came in 1846, when the Finnish National Art Society was formed. Most of the artists that they celebrated had been trained abroad, mostly in France, but these were homegrown Finnish artists who were choosing Finnish portrait subjects and Finnish landscapes. The Art Society would begin collecting art, and eventually a very Finnish art style would develop. Check out this giant ant mound. It's humongous. Ants. Both the Kalevala and the Art Society were internal factors, so that's things happening inside of Finnish society. There were also some external factors pushing Finnish nationalism. The first major external factor came in 1848, when Europe saw a series of major nationalist revolutions. There were Germans, Italians, Poles, and Hungarians, none of whom had their own country. There was no Hungary, no Poland, no Germany, and no Italy at that time in Europe. But those people sure wanted them to be. Now, none of these revolutions were a success, but they did promote and spread the ideals of nationalism, something that the Finnish people did catch on to. Now, there wasn't a nationalist revolution in 1848 in Finland, but this did create the political ideal of nationalism in Finland. The second external factor was a program called Russification in the late 19th and again in the early 20th century. Russification was a process promoted by Tsarist Russia, by which they were trying to make their subject people more Russian, hence Russification or Russification. Now, nothing makes you more proud of your own culture like a foreign culture trying to force you to become like them. The Finns reacted very negatively to Russification, and that really calcified in them a desire to be independent. So ultimately, Tsarist Russia's program to try to make their subjects more loyal had the exact opposite effect. Okay, so it's the early 20th century, and the Finns now want an independent country. But how did they get it? Well, fortune smiled on them, because in 1917 is when the Russian Revolution occurred. So Russia was already very depleted and distracted by World War I. Then in February 1917, there was a revolution. Then in October 1917, the Bolsheviks took power in Russia. Now, the Bolsheviks said that they believed in self-determination. That means that every group of people should be able to choose its own government, its own country. And the Finns took that seriously, and they requested directly to Lenin that they be granted independence. And on December 31st, 1917, Lenin officially granted them independence. Now, the Finns were really reluctant to even talk to Lenin because they were mostly bourgeois elites who did not approve of the Bolsheviks. And in fairness, Lenin didn't want to talk to them. He considered them bourgeois elites. But one hand washes the other. The Finnish elite wanted an independent Finland, and Lenin wanted to be acknowledged as the legitimate leader of the Bolsheviks and of the Russian government. So both of them got what they wanted. Okay, Finland is officially an independent country, but what kind of country are they going to be? There was a fierce debate as to whether they should be a republic or monarchy. There was actually a strong interest in recruiting a king from one of the royal families of Germany. Finland and Germany were getting on very well. In fact, many Finns traveled to Germany during World War I to learn how to be soldiers and officers, preparing for a possible armed revolution against Russia before the Communist Revolution happened. Ultimately, the idea of monarchy was abandoned, though, mostly because it didn't fit their national image. That, again, Finland didn't have a lot of Finnish aristocracy, so they decided to become a republic. But even that wasn't set in stone. After independence, they fought a civil war against a red uprising. But after a couple years, that was in the past, and the Republic of Finland was officially born. Okay, I have finished my hike through the national park, and I've also finished this brief history from start to finish.